Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the April Genealogy Workshop featuring Antoinette Harrell. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A feature. We will answer all of your questions at the end of the webinar. Now, Kathy Hambrick, the founder of the River Road African American Museum, will say a few words.
Hello, everyone. I want to welcome everyone from around the country to our third African American Genealogy Workshop sponsored by the River Road African American Museum and the Social Science Research Council. I hope that we have a continued following from the first and second workshop that was conducted by Karen Royal, sharing information about the GU 272, Georgetown's sale of enslaved people to Ascension Parish. We will be picking up that series again, and you'll hear more at the end of this session. Next month, we will have Tom Reed on May 13th at 7 p.m. So look, he's from FamilySearch out of Utah. So please make sure you follow the River Road African American Museum with the links that Regina will provide for you at the end of this session so that you can learn more about FamilySearch's involvement in helping African Americans more and more, and what the difference is between Ancestry.com and FamilySearch. You'll have an opportunity to ask an authority from FamilySearch, African American authority, any questions about your process, difficulties, or give them accolades about ways that they may have helped you. Without any further ado, I would like to introduce you to our good friend for a long time at the River Road African American Museum, and our personal friend who has done several workshops here in Louisiana about African American genealogy and public history in what we call the Florida parishes. And maybe Antoinette will also explain, for those of you who don't know, what Florida parishes, what the parishes in South Louisiana were included as the part of what we call the Florida parishes. She will answer questions about that also. So Dr. Antoinette Harrell is a genealogist, local historian, peonage detective, filmmaker, and producer. She is a renowned genealogist and local historian with an emphasis in African American history in Tangipahoa and St. Helena parishes here in South Louisiana. For the past 20 years, she has researched the subject of peonage and modern day slavery in 16 states. Her peonage research has been featured on Vice, and she is the producer of her own show, Nurturing Our Roots Genealogy Educational Talk Show. She was appointed as the Honorary Attorney General for her dedicated commitment in documenting the study of genealogy in 2003 here in the state of Louisiana. Her research has been featured in many media publications, on television news shows, and radio programs, both nationally and internationally, including People magazine. Dr. Harrell received the Living Legacy Asala Award in 2014 for her documentary film productions. She is a community activist and an organizer for communities searching for their roots here in Louisiana and throughout the country. So thank you so much, my friend Antoinette, Dr. Harrell, and you may continue, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you, Kathy. I would like to thank the River Road African American Museum for inviting me to be a part of these genealogy series. And thank you for this always enlightening, educating everyone about our history. But I would like to briefly tell you about my presentation this afternoon. Many of us know that the Juneteenth celebration became a federal holiday last year. But I must say that as a Pinnish researcher, I have found that many hundreds of thousands of African Americans in this country did not get their freedom in 1865. So what I would like to share with you all today is to look at the documents and hear from the people themselves about their plight. So thank you once again for allowing me to use your platform to share this information. So I would like to go ahead and get started in my PowerPoint, please. Give me 1 minute to pull it up. Peonage, involuntary servitude, slavery. When did slavery end in the United States? That's the big $1 million question. When did it end? And for whom did it end? And when and where? Whether the lonely roads, isolated roads take you. This picture, when I look at it, it just resonates on the many long hours and many days and years that I drove behind those wooded areas, not knowing what I would find, but at the same time, my curiosity wouldn't let me stop for traveling those roads. Peonage, detective, involuntary servitude, modern day slavery, bondage research. Let's define what peonage is. The act, peonage definition, let me go back. The use of labor bound in servitude because of debt. Many of the people who probably identify themselves as sharecroppers, but you would see the terminology peonage used in many cases where they was held in the condition of peonage, could not leave those plantations. Whether that debt was something that they incurred or whether it was just forced up on them, they could not leave. They was bound to these plantations, bound to the farmers or the individuals or the companies, because it was companies as well. It just wasn't the plantation owners, some of the companies. And throughout this presentation, you will see documents to prove these cases. I have spent 30 years researching peonage cases at the National Archives, in courthouses, collecting oral histories. But I do want to point out in the general records of the Department of Justice, record group 60 is where you will find the cases of peonage. One of the things I do want to point out is that we look at the records that we can see in the courthouse, but I'm looking at criminal records of, that's what I was in this courthouse attic looking for, criminal records of a sheriff in the state of Mississippi. Now, what I want you to take note of is that look at all of these records in the attic, books and books and books. And this is just the one area that you can see. But as you can see, it was dark in the area and we had to use a flashlight to find some of these records in the attic. I was told that, let me just point out something with this. The first time they let me in the attic, when the sheriff found out that I was there, he said I couldn't go back. And first of all, let me point out that no one wanted to go into the attic because they said there was ghosts in the attic. No one wanted to go there. But there was this one lady who said, I'll take you up into the attic. And the books, I mean, it's just so many books that would be vital to this type of research. If we don't do anything about it, these records will never be seen again. So I just want to point out, this is just one courthouse that is housing records in attics. This is another picture where you can see these books that is inside the attic. And I just want to say that these records have not been scanned and put on microfilm. So if we don't get to them, I can tell you this, the pigeons, the rain, the weather, pigeon droppings, they're having a field day with these records. Slavery by another name is what Doug Blackman called it. Involuntary servitude in the United States from 1866 to 1973. And I really want to emphasize that 1973 because when I was researching at the National Archives, the index said that the records went up to 1973. What that means is that there was cases that was filed as late as 1973. Now, when I think about 1973, and we think about that movie Alice, the movie Alice, when May took her freedom in 1963, but if we look at 1973, there was people that was making complaints as late as 1973 held in that system. What is the relationship between the system of sharecropping, tenant farming, and crop lien system, the Freeman Bureau contracts, and convict leasing? I found peonage practices. Before it was 16 states, my document just added 2 more states. The state of Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Tennessee, Kansas, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, Florida, Oklahoma, New York, Ohio, and Kentucky. All of these states had major complaints where people was held against their will, African Americans. What type of records did I find? I found the Department of Justice files, FBI files, letters written to presidents. 3 presidents that come to mind: Franklin D. Roosevelt, Calvin Coolidge, and Warren Harding. And a letter from a governor of Mississippi writing and asking for investigation to these peonage practices, NAACP files, and letters from private citizens. Here's one letter. This letter was written in 1915, April the 8th, 1915. The letter was written to Hans C.B. Lee, U.S. District Attorney, signed by the governor, Earl Brewer of Mississippi. And he said, I am handing you a letter. Let me just move this over. I am handing you a letter from a darky, which is rather difficult to read, but which refers to the forced attention of a family on the plantation of Mr. Sel Jones at or near Sharkey, Mississippi. I will state that within the past month, at least 5 Negroes have been to me with pitiful tales as to the way they have been beaten up and the statement that they had to flee for their lives, leaving their families on this place. One of them was caught after gotten some miles away and carried back there forcibly. It looks as if peonage was practiced on this place to quite an extent. And if your department could make an investigation, I believe you would unearth a bad condition here. I know it's a rather difficult matter to get evidence in such case, but that you will do all in your power, I am confident. Now, this is the governor asking for an investigation. It doesn't get any clearer than that. Here, let me go back. I wanted to give you a sample of what a Federal Bureau investigation file would look like. They filed this case in Jackson, Mississippi. The date was May the 5th, 1944. It's a synopsis fact. A father advised sons held against their will by employer who refused to release them because of a debt. Subjects also refused to state amount of debt that was owed. Bill Neeson, colored, Mendenhall, Mississippi, and he named his 2 sons. So someone was looking for their family members in the census and can't find them. Sometimes they are on these plantations. And if we look at the Federal Bureau investigation report, it would give the name of the case was involuntary servitude and slavery. Now look at that, and slavery. So it clearly states that in 1944, there was people held as slaves. And the father who was trying to get his sons back during this time, when he made this investigation, He was just one of the people, because many people that was able to file these complaints, there were some people that couldn't file complaints. People like May's story. You will find that some complaints have been made, you find that others haven't. This particular story, 1946, two sheep-headed men of Clyde Peters Circles show held Eco and Ico, the so-called sheep-headed men of Clyde Peters Circle. The boys was about 6 or 7 years old when he was kidnapped by the circus sideshow operator. When July the 25th, 1946, and let me take you to the document. Now, the document says that they was held for a total of 20 years, 20 years as slaves for the circus. The document was filed in Walnut Grove, Illinois, and it was an FBI report. And reports like this give you a lot of detailed information. What they said in this particular report, they was doing flunky work, washing people clothes and that kind of stuff, just being abused. And this is a picture of them with a lady who they call Monkey Girl, who was also held because it was supposed to be that she had a partial brain, and they was going around kidnapping people's children and putting them in the circles. Mm-hmm. I want to turn your attention to the NAACP file March the 4th, 1927. Now, the reason I'm giving you all these different years is because I'm not talking about 1800s in the 1800s. I'm talking about in 1927, 1944, 1946. This letter was written to Hans John Sargent, Attorney General. Complaint, a letter charged peonage practices on a plantation in Mississippi. The nearest town was Mendola, Mississippi. How many people? 200 people or more. And I have found many documents that said there was 200 or more people held on this plantation. The owner of the plantation, Charlie Johnson. The letter was written by James Weldon Johnson, the secretary of the NAACP. And when I scanned these documents, I did not want to change anything. As you can see, whatever markings was on the letters, that's just the way it was scanned in its original form. Here it is, another claim it was slaves. Now this particular, and I couldn't figure that out. I found a lot of newspaper clippings that didn't cite the year. They would cite a month, but they didn't cite the year. When September the 14th, I have no idea. No year was attached to the article. 9 Missourians charged with violating the Constitution. The Smiths owned 20,000 acres, and they secured 40 Negroes from Memphis and Cairo. The Negroes who are their witness tell stories that they sound much like they was in the days of slavery. 2,000 acres. I remember when talking to May and many other people like May, the first thing they would say, where would you going to go? Who could you talk to? Where could you run? When you think about 20,000 acres and the next door neighbor may be your friend or a family member, it was a very good thing they was able to get this complaint in because I know somebody had to steal away just to be able to do that at that particular time. I want to turn your attention to this photograph because this is a jail. This jail was on a plantation. They built a jail on the plantation. The owner of the plantation would go in town and he would get these men out of jail, all women, and have them to come to his place. And this was the holding place. The door to the right, they said the women was in this side, and the door to the left was for the men. And I was able to go into this building for many, many years. I couldn't understand why Vice didn't use this photograph, but once again, when somebody else is telling the story, but this was a very important component to it because they built their own jail and was going to town, getting people out and putting them in this jail. This was one of the ladies that told me the story about the jail. She shared that with me. Now, I want you to know I'm sitting at the desk on the plantation, and I'm looking at everything I can look at. And I'm asking questions. And they allowed me to look at things. And I was able to scan a lot of the material that I found on this plantation. The photo before that, I'm looking at a plantation book that kept a document of all the people who was working on the plantation and how much cotton they was picking. It was a cotton plantation. I don't think I'll ever have that opportunity again. So therefore, I took advantage of the opportunity of being there at that particular time because I wasn't allowed to go back a little while after that. Some of the stories that I have come across that I find that I want to share with people. First was May Louise's story. Second will be Lewis Allan, who was murdered because he witnessed Herbert Lee being murdered at the Cotton Gin in Amite County, Mississippi, by an elected official. And they killed Lewis Allan. Johnny Lee Gaddy was one of the boys at Arthur G. Dozer Reform School in Marianna, Florida, who was caught up in a system of peonage. And that's what caught my attention was the school. It was a school holding these children. At that time, the campus was a segregated campus. And Mr. Johnny Lee Gaddy shared his experience, and it was a heartbreaking experience with all of these people. And at the very bottom of the image is Arthur Walls, which is May's brother, who is still living. And just the fright, oh my God, I just looking at their eyes and listening to their story, it's just so heartbreaking, but they are strong people, they're resilient people. And when May said, they cannot do to me anything that they haven't already done, I'm going to tell my story. This particular story, 2 accused of selling a Negro family of 5. Crawford Allen, his wife, and 3 children was kidnapped out of Liberty, Mississippi, and sold into Tangier Hole Parish. This family of 5 people sold for $20. A family of 5 people in 1926. This family was sold. Last year, this case sat on my desk for 20 years in hopes that I would meet the family members. I met the grandson last year, and they knew that their grandfather, Lewis Allan, was murdered, which is Crawford Allen's son, but they had no idea that their grandfather, Lewis, was one of the children that was in that house. And the way that Time magazine described the children, they called the grown-ups aliens and called the 3 children Crawford Allen and his pickaninnies. So I wrote a letter to Time. I'm still waiting today for a response that this family was described in such a meaningful way. Now, the census and genealogy played a major part in finding these families, researching these families. When they give me information, I have to research, go and find whatever I can. And I found Crawford Allen in the census. And little did I know, and that's why genealogy is so important. I found that my 3rd great grandmother married an Allen from the same area. And it was another family member that made the connection for us. The man that you're looking at to the right is Lewis. And in the middle with the man with the red and white and blue shirt, that is Lewis' son. That is Mr. Henry Allen. He is the one that picked up his father's brains off the ground when he went to Mississippi. They was living in Mississippi, and he saw his father, the truck lights was on. And he went to investigate what's going on. And he put his foot where, your foot is somewhat, is right there by the door, right by the door when you get in. He felt something. And when he reached down, that was his father's body. It was the brains that he had stepped on, his father's brain. And that is his grandson. So at this particular image, I am sharing with them that his father also was sold in 1926. They knew that he was shot, but they did not know that he was that little boy that was in the house at 6 years old. Now, Lewis Allen was a man. He went off to the World War II. His family told me to come back, to be murdered. And now we're talking about the same man who fought for a country and was sold in 1926. It's very, I just want to give you all a little testament from his son. Let me just get to that part. You want to continue that question?
So in Time Weekly, not only did they call them Pickaninnies, they called them aliens. And the alien goes on to fight in World War II to preserve freedom of the country. And they're nude, you said?
That was nude. That's what they said, they was nude. So at this time, I have to pull some more documents because the Associated Press, as you can see in that article, they did not mention that they was nude, nor did they call them pickaninnies. So I really need to look at where they get their facts from, because in order for Time Weekly to say nude, it had to be in some report somewhere. So all the indictments and everything that you see, we got to pull the records up to support that.
But in history, they teach that slavery ended in 1865 to the majority of American people. And this is in 1926, a long time after, quote unquote, Emancipation Proclamation.
60-some years.
So troublesome is that we can't benefit from our labor. So whatever my grandfather earned, his father earned, because they had my great grandfather and my grandfather in slavery in 1926, and none of us can reap the benefits of their labor. And that's the American dilemma, really. The big problem is we can't seem to pass on the wealth that we earn. And whatever we sacrifice for during our time, we can't pass that on to the next generation because of these kind of incidents.
Mr. Allen, I'm watching you and I'm looking at, I just wish I can see what's in your mind learning this new information. What are you thinking about as you hear this story?
Well, maybe I shouldn't say what I'm thinking right now. I do know that I don't have to wonder no more who the devil is. I don't have to wonder about that. I don't, I was brought up, I was baptized when I was 12 years old. I was told that's when Jesus was baptized, at 12. And I was also told by the old preacher or whatever you call it, about this heaven and hell deal. And now, as I watch life, if it's a hell there that's worse than this, I'm ready to go. I don't believe no more. And no hell, burning hell and flying around in the sky.
It's always hard to hear it, but I just want to share something else with you.
For the past 20 years, Antoinette Harrell, renowned genealogist and peonage researcher, has unearthed thousands of state and federal documents relating to peonage. This documentary exposes what she found.
After researching my own family history and wanting to know more about my own family history, there was other people that learned of me in some small towns, and they wanted to tell me their story. And when I would go out to interview these families, I thought I was just going to learn about marriage license and deeds and, you know, all the things that you would find in your personal family history. But when I met people that said that they was held as slaves up until the 60s, I was very surprised.
Harrell started traveling throughout the South in search of the individuals or their families who were held in the form of slavery called peonage.
The first families I met was in St. John Parish, and they was on what you call Water for Three Plantation, and they was working in sugarcane plantation, but they was too terrified. They just did not want to tell anybody what they had experienced because they was just afraid for their life. And I moved over to Tangier Hole Parish where my family started out in Tangier Hole. I met a woman named May Louise Wall Miller was her name. And she came out one night and she said, I gotta tell you my story. She said, me and my family was held as slaves up into the 60s. Well, I wasn't surprised. I was just happy to hear that somebody really wanted to tell the story, wasn't afraid to tell the story. And I asked her, I said, how soon can I meet your family? She said, you wanna know something? My father's still alive and he's 105 years old. And as a genealogist, I knew you just don't put people off that age. You get there as soon as you possibly can. I made arrangements to get that in 2 days. And after sitting there and talking to our father, who was able to tell me the names, the locations, and how all the work that he did, what he harvested, when he had to work so hard to get the cotton from sun to sundown, and what the children had to go through. May was the first family that was willing to go publicly about their life as peons held in the system of peonage. And what peonage means is to be held in the system to work off a debt, involuntary servitude. You're going to stay here to work off that debt, whether you owe the money or not, you're not leaving off this plantation.
Harrell started to dig deeper, looking for any written evidence to prove that what the former 20th century slaves and peons told her were recorded somewhere. She traveled to the National Archives in Washington, D.C. to research peonage files and found thousands of records such as newspaper articles, Federal Bureau of Investigations reports, NAACP reports, letters from private citizens, and also letters to and from elected officials.
The last interview I want you to hear is from this man here. This is Johnny Lee Gaddy. He was held as a peon at the infamous Arthur G. Dozer School in Marianna, Florida.
A river run through that area. I didn't know it when I was a kid. So I talked to some of them. People that lived there, older people, when me and you was all up there. And I talked to him. He said, yeah, I was living right there by the school. If a black guy would run, he would usually stop by, and I couldn't keep him here. He said, but I gave him a piece of money and tell him he can't stay. He got to keep on going, because he said, these people will kill my whole family if I help you guys. So I can understand what he meant. So I said, well, I'm glad you tried to help him the best way you could.
Did the dog ever catch you?
I didn't ever run.
You never run.
I wouldn't even know where to go if I did run.
Mm-hmm. So those boys that had to kiss the dog, did they kiss the dog rear end, or was it his private parts?
His private part, that was, and they did it. If he was out of your college, he had to do that in front of all the kids in the college to see him. So they was setting an example that they wasn't slaying. And then they had a rule, if you had a trip to go to movies or something, and you had a runner, You had a year you had to go without a runner. You could go to the movies. But if you had a runner, you were wiped out that whole year. You couldn't go nowhere. So he, as a punishment, he would bring them dogs to the cottage, and they would set a circle around that boy and look at that dog. How they make that him do to that dog. A lot of guys said they run, but I didn't even know. I'd never been that far in my life. So where was I? Where was I gonna go?
At 11 years old?
I never left the home in my life. Went to one town to another, but that was about the far. I never came that far down.
So what, running was not a question for you?
No. See, our time there was 9 months.
That story that Pastor Johnny Lee Gaddy is sharing is 1957. I wanted to find the money. I wanted to follow this money trail at this school because most of the boys say it was disguised as a school, but it was a slave camp for the ones on the black side of the campus. So I started to look at these quarterly reports to trace this money. If you look at this produce report, it's October 1958. And I wrote Senator Darrell Rousson and Representative Tracy Davis and the Florida State representatives to ask them to, yes, it's one thing to address the beatings, but let's talk about the labor that was taken away from these little boys. If you look at it, the Dairy Division, I.D. Howard and H.U. Tidwell in charge. They had 1,950 gallons of milk at 70 cents a unit, total $1,365.70. And it just goes on and tell you how much money was being made. I still don't understand why, although the state of Florida apologized and they discussing paying for the damages of what happened to these children, but they have not dealt with the slavery aspects of the school, where these boys was used on the black side of the campus for the produce, raising the livestock, that sort of thing. Now, that's very important because it spells it out in this document. Just how many pounds, look at the sweet potatoes, 6,290 pounds of sweet potatoes those boys raised and harvested, and the list goes on. So for that total quarter, it was $10,980.36. That's what these boys, that's not including the timber that was used, that these boys was used to cut the trees down out the swamps. And I had a man that called me yesterday and he was in tears. He was saying that he had to dig the hole and put some bodies in when he was there. Now, when he was there, we're talking about 1970. That's when he was there. This was their stories. May Louise Wall Miller story, the Lewis Allen story, the Johnny Lee Gaddy story, the Arthur Walls, and the Wall family story. Here is some reference on penage. May's name was just added to Wikipedia, but there are many articles that you will find on Johnny Lee Gaddy's case, forced labor and the forgotten Black boys of Florida. And that's why my work was very important, to push these men's stories to the forefront. I had to. The croplings, this is where it all started in for May's family. This is my great uncle who had to go borrow $652 in 1939, and many of them lost their land behind this. They couldn't make that loan. And so that's what happened to May's father. They lost their land and he had to become a sharecropper. For more information, you can contact me at 504-858-4658. If you have a story of someone that you know that was living in these type of conditions, please reach out to me and share that information with me. Right now, I will turn it over to Regina and let her direct us from there.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that information with me. I was not aware of anything like that in my wow.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So the first question that was asked is, will we have access to the presentation slides after this?
Well, the slides that's on the video, that's there on this presentation, is up to Kathy what she wants to do with that, because she's recording. But we are producing a documentary that will be ready for June the 18th. And I would certainly like to have it premiered at the River Road African American Museum with some of the testimonies of people who actually went through it, and you will see some more new documents that I haven't shared.
Wow, thank you. Kathy, you're on mute. Can you unmute yourself and direct that question?
Yeah, so I want to let everyone know these genealogy programs are being recorded. So yes, you will have access to this presentation through YouTube, the museum's YouTube channel, through the website. Regina is putting up that information. Just give us about a week or so. And how long is it taking, Regina, to get it posted?
Yes, in about a week, we get it on the museum website under events.
And thank you, Antoinette. And we look forward to having the documentary shown in Donaldsonville. And I also want to say to you that I have a contact in Natchez, Mississippi, and also a contact through an African-American museum in Tallahassee, Florida. So they may also be interested in premiering it in their states.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so the next question was, where can you access the FBI files?
The FBI files is at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. Because they are federal files. So that's where you'll find them at.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else asked, where can we see the documentary? So we're going to have it at the museum. Is there anywhere else that they can see it besides when we feature it?
Yeah, we're working on that now, and I will, announce that on all of my social media sites as well as get it over to you all. But we're working on that right now.
Excellent. The next question is, when you were in the attic, were you allowed to bring in your own portable scanner to get the images of the documents, especially since you experienced so much resistance getting access to them?
I was able to bring in my camera. And so the professionals that was with me, they was able to take pictures of the documents that I needed. And I felt that the camera would have been much quicker than the scanner, because some of it was in very, very heavy books, but we did manage to get what we was looking for. I mean, if you only know what we had to go through to, first of all, to get up in the attic with no lights. And then for this one person who went to this one book, and it was Walter Black and John Mosley was with me, and we was in the attic, we was looking, and this guy just went to this book and he pulled this book and he opened this book with a flashlight, and he just shines this light, and he said, "Antoinette, is this what you're looking for?" Then that's when I knew it was spiritually guided. See, I knew then, because he wasn't even looking, he was just standing by. And when he went to the shelf and pulled that book, I was looking for the sheriff's records to show that he was charging these men with trumped up charges, both Black and poor white men, and putting them on this lumber camp and working them off. It was really, if I don't have to go back there, I really don't want to go back there, but if I had to, yeah.
Excellent. Well, I don't see any more questions in the chat. Kathy, do you have any questions for Antoinette?
Well, I want to say that this is when history hurts. And Antoinette, you and I and our colleagues across the country who have been doing years of this research, because we are the first generation to have access to these attics, these basements, these documents. I want all of you on the call to realize that you too are part of the first generation in this digital age. So we need your help as you are doing genealogy, coming back to the South, or finding records within your own families, family homes, as we start to get geared up again to have family reunions after this season of coronavirus. We want to encourage all of you to do these interviews with your own family members, because the history is oftentimes not written down. And those video clips of those oral history interviews that was shared with us by Antoinette, you too can do the very same thing in your own family. And you may be surprised at what you find out. I tell children all the time that Black history starts at home. You know, there are so few books written about our history with our stories. There are so few people who are still living in their 90s or 100 years old or even in their 80s. And we owe it to them walking around with these cell phones. And I don't mean to be critical, but I have to bring it to your attention. We walk around with these cell phones. We let our children have these cell phones, and we spend a lot of time on foolishness. And I want to say to you, if you're interested in Black Lives Matter, I don't care whether it's a quote, I don't care how you feel about it as a political statement, but if Black lives really matter to you, and if Black history really matters, we need you all to become involved in recording your own family stories and sharing these stories with your children and your neighbors' children. And at the end of those presentations, and Antoinette said something that really, really sticks in my mind that I don't think our children hear enough of. And that statement that she made is that we are a resilient people. And if you just think about what you heard in this presentation today, how many times do you say that to your children? We are a resilient people. And I want to thank you again, Antoinette. I want to remind everybody that our next workshop will be with Tom Reed of FamilySearch and the Church of Latter-day Saints, Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints from Utah on May 13th, which is a Friday night at 7 p.m. He will talk about the difference between FamilySearch and Ancestry.com. We will have more of these workshops coming throughout the year. And you will also see an invitation and save the date coming very soon for our Juneteenth weekend program involving the GU 272 and Ascension Parish, those enslaved people who were sold by the Jesuits of Georgetown to Henry Johnson, an Episcopalian who became the 5th governor of Louisiana, and those enslaved people that ended up in Donaldsonville. And oh wow, you just don't want to miss the unveiling of this exhibit at the Episcopal Church of Ascension. I'm fortunate to be able to curate that exhibit thanks to a grant from the Social Science Research Council. All I can say is when history hurts, we must remain resilient. We must support Angelique and the Antoinette and the work that she does. And if you would like to make a donation to the River Road African American Museum to support our programming like this in the future, you can see on the screen right now where you can go online and make a donation so that we can continue to introduce you to the scholars like Dr. Antoinette Harrell here in Louisiana. Thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing you on May 13th.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.